Soren Kierkegaard, Chapter 10. The final phase of Kierkegaard's existence was the last of the three stages of evolving spiritual life which he, like any other religious man, experienced: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious stages. Parentheses, either or, close parentheses. There is no doubt but that Kierkegaard retained, for the greater part of his life at least, some of the athlete's, or more precisely, the poet's traits. For example, he loved sarcasm and continued to the very last to use his sardonic irony. But he considered a reconciliation of these three stages impossible. The life of the spirit moves upward in abrupt stages of growth. These stages have in our times assumed an added interest because of the claims of modern existentialism, which regard Kierkegaard as a progenitor. Yet there is little genuine spiritual relationship between Kierkegaard and the most conspicuous of the French existentialists, Sartre and Camus. Their thinking remains, as we shall see, within the limits of the first of these stages, the aesthetic. In the aesthetic stage, man cultivates the mood of an enjoyable but deceptive harmony or pleasure. And with Kierkegaard's own Diary of the Seducer and the masterful analysis of Mozart's Don Juan are outstanding examples. Man, detaching himself from moral struggle and indulging in the search for beauty and pleasure, remains within the realm of unreality and dream. Everything becomes play, passive enjoyment, a poetic delusion. History assumes the shadow-like contours of a myth, while reality loses its true character. The aesthete constructs for himself a fictitious world of dreams, lives only in the immediate present, and finds himself ultimately rejected by his life's moral realities, as Nietzsche's latter tragedy illustrates. It is a dead-end route that leads to boredom and disgust and deprives life of all meaning. The aesthete possesses only the present moment. He is self-centered and despairing, searching for more pleasures to escape from this despair, only to learn that his evasion of moral and religious reality leads him into nothingness. Like young Parsifal, he does not know how to ask the right questions about the meaning of suffering and life. He never asks whether he is guilty, and he resembles Dr. Faustus in living in an abysmal vacuum. Kierkegaard applies his condemnation of pure thinking as treason to the spirit, with equal vigor to the poet when he says, quote, "From the Christian point of view, and in spite of all aesthetics, any poet's existence is a sin, viz. the sin that one is writing poetry instead of living, that one occupies oneself with God and truth only in one's imagination instead of aiming at experiencing both existentially," close quote. Parentheses, either or, and the sickness unto death, close parentheses. Much of Kierkegaard's condemnation pertains prophetically to Nietzsche's later praise of life as, quote, "an aesthetic phenomena," close quote, which to him was the only value which justified it. Nietzsche did not recognize Christian ethics as a moral world principle. His final despair and his contourless vision of a new life support Kierkegaard's warnings expressed a generation earlier. Such is also the mood of the existentialism of which Sartre and Camus are the exponents. Sartre illustrates the artist's despair graphically in his novel Nausea, and Camus in his essay on Sisyphus, which realizes the futility of his existence, but persists nevertheless with a sort of melancholy courage in trying to give some meaning to his life. Sorry, this is my own addition here. You can reverse the myth of Sisyphus from a meaningless redundancy to him being the foundation of forming thought, because from the boulder that he continued to push up and roll back down and push up, I get the impression that he formed a sphere and invented, in one sense, carving rocks. So I don't know, manipulating the environment. But that's just me. I'm not French. Okay, so where was this guy at? Sisyphus. Okay, who realized the futility of his existence, but persist nevertheless with a sort of melancholy courage in trying to give some meaning to his life. Some existentialists seem, however, far from feeling in this nothingness a sensation of being lost. They praise it as a delirious sense of freedom, a new reality devoid of the theories, beliefs, traditions, and cliches which camouflage our former ignorance and insecurity. Their new world has, to be sure, neither security nor authority, but it awaits man's new decision of some vague kind. Sartre praises this freedom as Promethean. His play, The Flies, dramatizes the Greek legend of Orestes, who murders his mother Clytemnestra and her husband Aegisthus. Orestes, rising above any fear of divine punishment, shouts at Jupiter, quote, "I am neither master nor slave. I am my own freedom. Hardly hast thou created me when I already ceased to be thy own," close quote. The qualms of consciousness are, therefore, no longer the reminders of moral laws. They are nothing more than bothersome flies, an insect pest that man must fight off in order to maintain his independence. Man, according to Sartre, is seldom aware of his freedom. Quote, "It hits him," close quote, as in the case of Orestes, quote, "like lightning," close quote. The gods have lost all power over him, and he affirms happily Nietzsche's proclamation that, quote, "God has died," close quote. Repentance would merely cancel out any freedom, and freedom which, quote, "chases the gods from their ancient thrones," close quote. Man must, quote, "invent his own way," close quote. Sartre calls this quite arbitrarily the, quote, "new humanism," close quote, centered on man in contrast to a God-centered way of life. Such a use of the term, quote unquote, humanism is arbitrary because humanism has never believed in an unbridled yielding to instincts and complete detachment from the laws of morality. It believes in the freedom of the individual for the sake of his own moral perfection and that of society. Sartre's freedom is nothing but moral anarchy. He is unhappy because he is, as it were, sentenced to be free. Sartre recognizes only these categories of human existence: accident, necessity, liberty, aloneness, and senselessness. The old faith that man has a destiny prescribed by a higher authority is gone. He is now, quote unquote, free, which in Latin it translates into bridled. But this freedom, that's my own note, sorry. But this freedom results in moral alienation from his fellow man and the subsequent fear of life and pan-anxiety. We must choose what to do, but we'll never know whether our choice was the right one. One can never define a man as long as he lives because, quote, "he is his life and nothing else," close quote. Life then has no pattern or providential design. It is meaningless, and despair is, therefore, only logical. Such a philosophy is a far cry from Kierkegaard's remark in his journal that, quote, "life must be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards," close quote. Camus, too, believes that life is senseless, but he still endeavors to find a meaning for it. His insoluble dilemma is to see a chance for moral perfection without believing in God. He asks, quote, "is it possible to become a saint without believing in God?" That is the sole concrete problem worth considering nowadays, close quote. In his play Caligula, he recognizes an obligation towards his fellow man without being able to solve the inherent moral problem. but at least his effort in the direction of moral perfection moves him closer to a genuine humanism than Sartre's ever has been or may be in the future. Like Sartre, who has promised to write a code of ethics at some future date, Camus leaves us without moral guidance.